Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into complex ideas and extract the core knowledge you need to be immediately well-informed.
Today we are taking on a really challenging idea. It's an axiom that, on the surface, sounds like it's just wrong.
It sounds actively self-destructive, really.
Yeah.
The axiom is this: the best strategy is to have no preference.
And right away, that creates this philosophical tension, doesn't it? Because strategy, I mean, the entire concept of strategy is about preference.
Exactly. It's choosing path A because you prefer outcome Z. It's the definition of making a choice.
So if we're going to take this seriously, we first have to figure out, is no preference just a fancy term for apathy? Is it a recipe for doing nothing?
Or is it something else? Is it, as our source material suggests, a highly advanced, almost hidden form of strategic mastery?
That's the core question of this deep dive. And for you, our learner, think of this as tracking a single thought experiment. We're going to start in a place that feels very familiar, very competitive, the world of game theory.
And from there, we're going to follow the logic step by step until it leads us to some truly radical philosophical conclusions about how reality itself works.
The key right at the beginning is resolving that first tension. Why does no preference not just equal no strategy?
Okay, so how does the source make that distinction?
It draws a line between strategy and what it calls meta-strategy. So a strategy is local. It's I do steps A, B, and C to get at this result I want.
Concrete actions for a preferred goal.
Precisely. But a meta-strategy is global. It's about defining the rules of the game itself. And the way it does that is by removing the single greatest weakness in any strategy.
Which is bias.
Which is bias, exactly. If I have a preference, say, for a particular opening move in chess or a specific marketing approach, that preference is a fixed point.
A pattern. And any pattern can eventually be figured out.
It can be reverse engineered and then it can be exploited. If you are always biased toward plan A, your opponent's entire job becomes just finding a way to counter plan A. Once they do that, they've neutralized you completely.
So the meta strategy of no preference it's the strategy of total optionality.
Yes. It's the plan to be completely fluid, totally unpredictable, and because of that, unexploitable. You're removing the very leverage your opponent needs to get a handle on you.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to trace this axiom through its logical consequences. And the first big question we have to answer is, where does this rule apply?
Does no preference govern the means, how we act? We can call that scenario A.
I'll win, but I don't care how I do it.
Right. Or does it govern the outcome itself? Scenario B.
I have no preference for winning or losing.
The choice between those two interpretations is everything. So let's start with the first one. Let's assume for now that the axiom is all about perfecting the means, the execution.
Okay, section 1. No preference is the perfect means. If we accept that the axiom is about how we act, the sources point to 3 really powerful arenas where this kind of non-bias creates a hyper-efficient strategy.
And the first one is probably the most poetic. We start with this ancient philosophy of action, often drawn from martial arts. The idea that true mastery is about becoming like water.
Be water, my friend.
Yeah.
It's a famous line. It sounds great, but let's look at it through a really cold strategic lens. What is the actual practical advantage of being water?
Well, the primary vulnerability in any dynamic system is rigidity. It's being stuck in one mode.
So if your preference is for, say, a heavy defensive stance in a fight, or a reliance on brute strength,
you're basically betting everything that the environment is going to accommodate that one preference. But what happens if the environment changes?
the terrain gets slippery, or your opponent is just too fast for you to hit.
Exactly. That rigid preference, which was your strength a moment ago, suddenly becomes a huge liability, and you can't get rid of it fast enough.
So preference, in this sense, is basically a pre-commitment. You're pre-committing to a method that could become useless at any second.
Yes. And water has no pre-commitment. It has zero preference for being steam or ice or a liquid. It instantly conforms to whatever container it's in.
So if the situation requires a punch, you become the punch. If it requires a retreat,
You are the retreat. There's no internal argument.
yeah.
And this absence of preference, this is the state that martial artists call mushin, the empty mind.
Mushin. We should pause on that for a second because that term is really important. It doesn't mean a blank mind like you're not thinking.
Not at all. It's a mind that is empty of preconceived ideas, of intentions, of emotional attachments to one method over another.
So it's like the pure mechanism of action.
It is. And the deduction here, the strategic outcome, is perfect efficiency. The action is no longer you imposing your will onto the world. The action is the situation just unfolding through you.
You stop wasting energy choosing between options, and instead all of that energy goes into the immediate perfect response.
It sounds unbeatable on a tactical level, doesn't it?
It really does. But the source material points out a really significant risk here. If you're constantly shape-shifting, always just adapting to the moment, where does your long-term goal fit in? What about your identity?
And that's the profound challenge. Because strategy, real long-term strategy, it often requires maintaining an identity, a brand, a moral code, a 5-year plan.
If you're constantly fluid, can you ever build the dam? Can you create that long-term structure?
Think about it in business. If my company is constantly changing its products, its mission statement, its whole ethos just to perfectly match every tiny market fluctuation.
You might maximize your profit this quarter.
For sure, you'd get maximum short-term gain. But you would utterly fail to build a recognizable brand. There would be no identity, no long-term loyalty or respect from your customers.
So the perfection of the means, this total fluidity, it could actually compromise the integrity and the consistency of your end goal. That's the strategic flaw.
You win the battle of efficiency, but you might lose the war of identity.
Okay, so that's the first path. Let's move from philosophy to pure mathematics, applying no preference to game theory.
Yes, specifically in what are called zero-sum adversarial games. We're talking about achieving the Nash equilibrium.
The Nash equilibrium.
Yeah.
Named after John Nash, of course. It's that point in the game where no player can do better by just changing their own strategy while the others stay the same. In simple terms, it's like the stable defensive balance point.
It is, and the cleanest, simplest example is that old children's game, rock, paper, scissors.
Right.
If you play that game against a human, you realize something very quickly. Humans are terrible at generating true randomness. Just awful.
We fall into patterns. We can't help it. We might start favoring the move that just lost, thinking it's due, or more often, we avoid the move that just won.
And a smart opponent, or more realistically, a high-speed trading algorithm, will spot that pattern instantly. Even if my distribution is just a tiny bit off, like I play rock 33.35% of the time instead of 33.33.
That tiny bias is leverage. It's an information leak.
It is a critical information leak. Your preference, however small, is a data point the opponent can use to predict what you're going to do next.
So the source material says the only mathematically unbeatable strategy is to maintain absolute indifference.
No preference between the three options. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Truly, perfectly randomized.
And why is that truly unexploitable? Is it just because I'm denying the opponent that predictive information?
That's exactly it. You are maximizing your own unpredictability. If you stick to true randomness, the long-term mathematical expectation is that you will break even. You are guaranteed not to lose any more than what statistics requires.
My opponent can try to find a pattern, but there's no pattern to find.
They can try all they want, but they can never gain a lasting statistical edge over you. So the deduction here is unexploitability. We've created maximum defensive stability by just getting rid of our own bias.
It's the ultimate strategic safety net.
And here we find the second major risk, and this one goes right to the heart of what strategy usually wants to do. This is a fundamentally defensive strategy.
It's designed to prevent loss.
Yes. But what if you know your opponent is weak? What if they're predictable? What if they're playing rock 80% of the time because they just like rock?
Well, a player with a preference for winning would immediately stop playing randomly. They'd switch to playing paper 80% of the time to crush them.
Correct. The Nash equilibrium of no preference guarantees you safety, but it fundamentally handcuffs you when you're facing a weaker, biased opponent. You forfeit the opportunity for aggressive, strategic maximization.
It's the difference between never losing money and never making a fortune.
It sacrifices opportunity on the altar of guaranteed security.
Okay, so that's 2 paths down. For our final path, where no preference governs the means, we look at, I guess, the most extreme end of efficiency. Modern technology.
Specifically, high-frequency trading, HFT. It's a world that operates at speeds and scales that are just beyond human comprehension.
The whole game in HFT is about finding the fastest, most unbiased decision-making process possible.
And what's the single biggest source of bias in a traditional trading environment?
The human being. The emotions.
Precisely. The human trader is just loaded with preferences. Oh, I prefer this stock because it's a stable blue chip. I prefer going long over short because it just feels safer. I feel attached to this company. I've followed it for years.
All of those feelings are from a purely mathematical perspective, pollutants.
They are. They lead to hesitation, to anchoring biases, and most importantly, they lead to a failure to execute the absolute optimal trade in that micro moment.
Whereas an algorithm has absolutely no preference. It couldn't care less about the company, the sector, the feeling of the market.
It only cares about the arbitrage in the math. It has a ruthless, absolute objectivity.
It can flip from betting on a stock's rise going long to betting on its total collapse going short in a literal millisecond.
Yes, and without any of the psychological friction of loyalty or hope or fear, if the data says move, the move is executed instantly. The emotional history of that asset is completely irrelevant.
The deduction here has to be ruthless objectivity. By stripping out all preference, we get a clarity of judgment that a human mind just cannot compete with. We see reality as pure data.
Not colored by hope or fear. But, as with the other paths, the risk appears when we zoom out and look at the larger system.
What happens if there's no preference for a good outcome?
Exactly. Without a preference for something like, we prefer systemic stability, or we prefer a responsible market that doesn't crash, the AI is just maximizing a variable.
It's just solving its little math problem.
It might be told to maximize transaction volume or maximize short-term profit, even if that very behavior is what destabilizes the entire global financial system. We saw flashes of this with the flash crashes.
So the algorithmic perfection of the means, the perfect trade execution, it lacks that internal preference, that moral North Star that you need to sustain a healthy system over the long term.
So in all three of our paths, water, Nash, and the AI applying no preference just to the means, gives us these incredible tactical advantages: perfect efficiency, unexploitability, total objectivity.
But each one comes at a cost. The cost of long-term identity, or the cost of maximizing opportunity, or the cost of systemic stability.
Which proves that the axiom is incomplete if we only apply it to our methods. It forces us, logically, to go back and address that core dilemma we started with.
Right. We're left with that critical question. Does the axiom apply to the means scenario A? I win, but I don't care how.
Or must it also apply to the outcome itself? Scenario B. I have no preference for winning or losing at all.
And this is where things get really interesting.
This is the logical trap that forces the entire thought experiment into really radical territory. We started out trying to achieve a preferred result: victory, safety, profit by using non-preferred methods, fluidity, randomness, coldness.
But the axiom is, the best strategy is to have no preference. Full stop.
So to choose between maximizing scenario A or scenario B, that choice is in itself a preference.
Wait, hold on. If we follow that logic all the way, doesn't even choosing to adhere to the axiom become a preference? Isn't the whole thing a paradox?
That is the beautiful, sharp edge of this logic. You are absolutely right that on a practical level, deciding to follow this path is a choice. But within the philosophical framework of the axiom itself, there's only one move that doesn't contradict the rule.
And that move is?
The choice that negates the maximum number of other preferences.
And the preference for winning over losing. That's the biggest one there is.
It's the fundamental bias. It is the engine that fuels all conflict, all striving, all strategy. So to adhere strictly to the rule of no preference, we are logically forced to abandon our attachment to the result.
We have to choose scenario B.
We must choose scenario B. Absolute no preference for winning or losing. This is the pivot point. This is where we stop talking about tactics and start talking about transcendence.
So we actually let go. We're no longer playing to win. We are playing to maximize our adherence to the state of non-preference. What on earth happens to a competitive dynamic when one player genuinely, deeply, structurally does not care about the outcome?
Well, think about traditional strategy. Whether it's a hostage negotiation, a corporate takeover bid, a political standoff, it relies entirely on one premise.
That your opponent values something.
Yes. That they value something more than they value their current situation. We call that leverage. I can manipulate you by threatening something you have a preference for keeping. Your job, your money, your reputation.
The threat has to land on a preference to have any effect.
But imagine a negotiation. Your only leverage is the threat to collapse the deal. But your opponent has absolutely no preference for the deal succeeding or collapsing. They genuinely see both outcomes as equally acceptable.
Then you have zero leverage. Your threat is completely empty. It's functionally meaningless.
They become strategically invincible. They can't be coerced. They can't be bluffed. They can't be manipulated because they have no internal vulnerability for you to hook into.
Let's bring this down to a more relatable level. Office politics.
Perfect example. Imagine you're dealing with a colleague whose primary goal is to undermine you to get a promotion. Their whole strategy only works if you prefer your current position or if you prefer not to be publicly humiliated.
You have to care about the stakes.
But if you enter that situation genuinely not caring if you get promoted or demoted or even fired because you have truly dropped the preference for that specific outcome, their tactics just dissolve into nothing.
They can't threaten you with a consequence you no longer fear.
They're left swinging at air. And this is the key. The player hasn't won the game by any traditional metric. They haven't gotten more money or a better title.
But they've done something much more profound. They have dissolved the game itself. They've removed the fundamental mechanism leverage that allowed the conflict to exist in the first place.
They leave their opponent playing solitaire, frantically trying to push buttons on a player who has already surrendered the entire battlefield by abandoning the preference for victory. The opponent is left playing against a cloud.
So the result of this isn't victory, it's the strategy of liberation.
Yes, you liberate yourself from the structures of conflict and coercion simply by abandoning the internal valuation system that was feeding the conflict.
That is a massive shift in perspective. And this isn't just some high-level philosophical idea. This mechanism, dissolving the game, is immediately relevant to you, the learner, in your day-to-day life.
We mention office politics, but think about personal anxiety. Where does our anxiety almost always come from?
From a strong preference for a certain future, I must get this job. My relationship must follow this specific path. I must avoid this failure at all costs.
You spend a tremendous amount of mental and emotional energy fighting against potential futures we don't like.
And that energy we spend fighting, that's the source of our stress. It's what makes us exploitable, not just by others, but by our own fears.
The strategic insight here is that you gain the high ground not by fighting harder, but by changing your internal valuation system. It's an inside job.
The moment you decide that the outcome, whatever it is acceptable, whether the deal closes or collapses, whether you win the argument or lose it, you stop interacting with the situation through a lens of anxiety.
And you start interacting with it through a lens of clarity. It changes your entire relationship with your environment. Instead of trying to impose your will on every situation, you become available to what the situation actually requires of you.
It's the ultimate form of preemptive de-escalation. The competitive, anxious energy just drains out of the system entirely.
And that freedom from coercive anxiety, that liberation, is the necessary prerequisite for the next stage of this deep dive. We've laid down the burden of control, and now we get to see how this non-preferential state fundamentally alters our understanding of physical reality itself.
Okay, so let's take this liberated perspective and move into the truly radical part of this thought experiment. This is where we cross the line from tactical strategy into, well, the realm of philosophical transcendence.
We're going to see a transmutation. Once we adhere strictly to the axiom, no preference for outcome, the concepts we started with in Section 1, water, the algorithm, they stop being tools we use for competition.
And they start becoming, what, principles of existence itself.
Exactly. We've moved from trying to defeat an enemy to realizing that the separation between us and the environment was an illusion all along, an illusion fueled by preference. Now, everything just starts to look like physics.
Okay, let's start with the water logic. In Section 1, water was about efficiency, about winning a fight. Now that we don't prefer winning, what is water truly doing?
Water is just flowing, it's obeying gravity, it's moving along the path of least resistance. It doesn't want to carve a canyon. The canyon is the inevitable happening of the environment acting through the water.
So the focus shifts.
Yeah.
It's no longer about efficiency against an obstacle. It's pure, immediate physics through the environment.
And the actor, the individual, stops acting out of conscious intent or preference, and instead they start happening as an inevitable manifestation of the immediate physical laws of that moment.
That sounds like no strategy at all. It sounds completely passive.
It looks that way. But the source material identifies this as the deep engine of evolution. Nature operates with a massive, profound non-preference. It doesn't care which mutation survives. It doesn't care if a species flourishes or goes extinct.
It's just throwing endless dice against the wall to see what sticks.
Exactly. And yet, through this mindless, non-preferential unfolding, you get these incredibly complex, beautifully structured outcomes. The perfect spiral of a nautilus shell. The astonishing complexity of the human brain.
So the universe generates these novel, perfect solutions through a process that has no intention behind it. The perfection is in the process itself.
It's the strategy of emergence. The perfection of action comes from a total surrender to the immediate physical and energetic requirements of the system.
Okay, that's water transformed.
Yeah.
What about the algorithmic logic? We saw the HFT algorithm using its coldness for profit. What happens when that AI drops its bias for profit and loss?
It stops trading.
And it starts reporting, stops reacting, and starts observing.
Precisely. The AI ceases to be a trader, and it becomes a pure sensor. If it has no bias towards the market going up or down, or good news versus bad news, it stops filtering reality through the lens of its own goals.
It achieves perfect situational awareness.
It just registers what is. The market is up 0.1%, trading volume is low, this specific asset is moving. It becomes a perfect mirror, reflecting reality without any distortion.
The ultimate outcome of this non-preferential observation is it's perfect clarity. It's the strategy of truth.
And this is so crucial. The only way to see objective reality is to lay down your subjective preferences. Every preference you hold, hope, fear, loyalty, dislike, is a filter. It's a lens that colors and distorts the raw data coming in. The non-preferential mind is the only instrument capable of seeing reality clearly.
So if we merge these two transformed principles, the principle of emergence, this spontaneous, perfect unfolding, and the principle of truth, this perfect, unbiased awareness, we arrive at the source's most provocative insight.
Yes, the stunning conclusion that the best strategy is, in fact, entropy.
Okay, this is the concept that needs the most careful explanation. Because in classical science, entropy is the bad guy. It's the villain of the universe.
Right. We're taught that entropy is the measure of disorder. It's the inevitable loss of available energy. It's the universe's slow march toward chaos and heat death. It's framed as the ultimate unavoidable loss.
So why on earth would the best strategy be guaranteed loss and disorder? That sounds like nihilism dressed up as philosophy.
It's because the source executes a radical reframing of the concept. It argues that we have to stop defining entropy as loss and start defining it as unconditional sharing.
Unconditional sharing.
And the best analogy for this non-preferential sharing is the unconditional generosity of the sun.
Okay, unpack that sun analogy for us. Why is the sun the ultimate example of this new strategic entropy?
The sun pours out an unbelievable amount of energy in every direction, all the time. It has absolutely no preference for who or what receives that energy.
It doesn't save its best light for the rose garden and skip the weeds.
Exactly. It shines on the rose and the weed. It shines on the just and the unjust. It doesn't hoard its energy. It releases it indiscriminately. And that act of indiscriminate giving increases the entropy in the solar system. It fuels potential. It drives the chemical reactions, the growing, the becoming of everything in its path. It is the fuel for life itself.
So by giving away its energy completely, without holding back for any preferred outcome, it generates the conditions for everything else to emerge.
The strategic victory here is breathtaking. Think about it. Preference is hoarding energy. It's the ego's desire to keep things stable, defined, safe for itself.
But by refusing to hoard energy, by dropping preference, you make a fundamental shift. You stop being a finite organism fighting against the environment, trying to save its own little energy store.
And you become an infinite source. You cease to be a lonely organism, and you become the environment itself, the very thing that feeds all organisms.
The moment you drop the preference for self-preservation, you achieve the strategy of wholeness. You are no longer separate from the field of existence.
And this brings us to the final dilemma we have to resolve before we get to the ultimate conclusion. Does this state of no preference lead to genuine nihilism? The belief that nothing matters, so why do anything at all?
Or does it lead to total acceptance? The realization that everything happens exactly as it must, so you can play your role without all the anxiety. The learner needs a really clear distinction here. If I don't care about the outcome, why don't I just sit on the couch forever?
The answer is that genuine non-preference, the true empty mind, mushin, is not passive. Nihilism is actually a preference in disguise. It's the preference for nothingness over something.
That's a subtle but important point.
Total acceptance, on the other hand, is the state where your limited egoic preferences evolve into a true universal preference that embraces all possibilities equally. It's like a declaration. I prefer everything that is unfolding exactly as it is.
So it's not apathy, it's a radical embrace of what is.
And that state, that wholeness, is what removes the anxiety. It allows the perfect, spontaneous action, that emergence we talked about, to flow through you. You aren't forced into silence. The silence is what allows the perfect melody to emerge without the lag of calculation.
Okay, this entire journey, from the Nash equilibrium all the way to reframing entropy, it all culminates in one final, ultimate strategic destination.
The strategy of no preference leads inevitably to the strategy of presence.
If you lay down the burden of bias, of attachment, of preference, you become wholly, dangerously, magnificently present.
And that total state of presence operates under a specific and a very radical logic that is the final conclusion of the source material. Reality is not flawed, it's not broken or in need of your fixing. It is already, in every single moment, optimum.
The totality of the one actor, this is where the source grounds this idea of the optimum. It's a deep metaphysical claim. Awareness is the substance of all existence, and there's only one actor. Let's tackle that claim first. What does it mean for there to be only one actor?
This moves beyond just a spiritual idea and into a radical strategic insight. If you believe reality is made of inert, dead matter, then conflict is inevitable. You are one piece of matter, and the world is opposing matter.
Me versus the universe.
Right. But if the core substance of everything is awareness, a single, living, self-organizing intelligence, then there are no external competing forces. There is no world separate from you. There's only one unfolding field.
So if the universe is the only actor, it's playing all the roles at once.
Yeah.
It's the hero and the villain, the winner and the loser, the rising tide and the receding shore.
And here is the logical consequence of that. The one actor literally cannot make a mistake.
Why not?
Because a mistake requires an external measuring stick, a goal that was aimed for and missed. But if the universe is the only thing in existence, then it is the standard against which all things are measured. It can't miss a target that it sets itself in every instant.
Therefore, whatever manifests right now is the direct, inevitable, and perfect result of the universe's total intelligence. It is, by definition, optimum.
Now, I have to jump in here with the skepticism that you, the listener, are surely feeling right now. If this moment is optimum, how do we account for conflict, for pain, for obvious failures? If the universe is a perfect, self-unfolding intelligence, why does it unfold wars and cancer and suffering?
That is the essential friction, isn't it?
It is, and the source addresses this by stating that our perception of failure or suffering relies on a subjective, localized preference, the preference that things should be X instead of Y.
My preference is for health over sickness, for peace over war.
Of course. But for the total intelligence, the conflict isn't a mistake. It might be the perfect unfolding of tension required for the next form to emerge. A thunderstorm isn't a mistake in the atmosphere, it's the perfect mechanism for energy exchange. The optimum conclusion is that every single moment is necessary and inevitable for the grand unfolding of the whole.
And realizing that is what allows us to drop preference entirely. It's the great relief.
To prevent this concept from just dissolving into wishful thinking, the source provides 5 logical pillars. 5 arguments that support the thesis that this specific moment, right now, is the optimum expression of reality. And we have to treat these as required conditions for the universe to even function.
Okay, let's dedicate some real time to these pillars. They're the foundation for this whole philosophy.
Pillar 1, the requirement of intelligence. For reality to be optimum, it cannot be random. If the foundation of existence were truly inert, dead matter, then the complexity we see all around us would be impossible.
The perfectly calibrated constants of physics, the self-organizing intelligence it takes to build a single atom, let alone a human nervous system.
The odds are just astronomical. The fact that reality consistently organizes itself, from the spin of an electron to the beat of a heart to the formation of a galaxy, proves that its substance must be a living intelligence, not random, inert matter. Optimum requires order, and order requires intrinsic living intelligence.
Okay, that's the first pillar. Pillar 2 is the requirement of wholeness or non-duality.
Right. If this moment were non-optimum, that would imply a compromise. It would imply a war between 2 separate forces, with A trying to stop B, and neither one fully succeeding.
But for perfection to exist, there can be no competing forces. Perfection can't be a compromise.
This requires us to accept that one actor principle we just talked about. There is only the dancer rearranging the dance. This eliminates the existential separation, the idea of me versus the world, which is the root cause of all strategic preference in the first place.
Pillar 3, the requirement of intimacy or subjectivity.
This one is subtle but critical. Perfection has to be felt. If the universe were just cold, objective math, a string of perfect, unfeeling formulas, you couldn't really call it optimum because optimum is a qualitative value. It's derived from feeling, joy, beauty, meaning.
So for it to be optimum, the one substance must be sentient. It must be capable of knowing its own beauty.
We are required to feel the optimum for it to be meaningful. The simple fact that you, the listener, can perceive beauty or feel pain means the substance of reality is capable of feeling itself. This ensures its inherent qualitative perfection.
Pillar 4. The elimination of time.
Perfection cannot be something we have to strive for in the future. If the optimum will only arrive next Tuesday, then this moment right now is inherently flawed.
And if this moment is flawed, the flaw would multiply and collapse the whole system. We'll get to that proof in a minute.
So optimum has to be timeless. It must be perfect now. This requires the eternal presence, a substance that holds time within it, rather than being trapped by it. And the only thing we know of that is truly eternal and always present is awareness itself.
Which brings us to the final pillar, Pillar 5, the final identification.
We just asked the question, what is the only thing that meets all four of those criteria at the same time? Inherently intelligent, whole, sentient, and eternally present.
It's not a goal we have to reach. It's not a god in the sky. It's not a physical object.
It is the awareness that is hearing these words, processing this deep dive. It is you. You are the substance that is required for the optimum to exist. And that realization is what completes the entire circuit of the strategy.
So this is where we close the loop. We've moved from strategy to non-preference, and we've realized the state of presence is the logical outcome. Why does the simple fact that, this moment prove as perfection? This is the ultimate strategic victory. The validation is internal, and it's inescapable.
The source gives three final, devastating arguments here that take this whole concept from abstraction into observable, undeniable reality.
Okay, let's hear them. Proof 1. The argument of intelligibility. Order versus chaos.
Consciousness can only engage with order, can only grasp patterns. If reality were pure, non-optimum chaos, if the universe were truly random and senseless, we wouldn't be able to perceive structure. You couldn't read these words, understand mathematical laws, or predict that the sun will rise.
We'd be a momentary, meaningless glitch in a vast, incomprehensible void.
The very ability of the human mind to grasp patterns, to follow a logical argument like the one we're having right now, proves that reality follows a perfect, underlying, intelligible logic. The ancient Greeks called it the logos. The fact that the world is knowable proves that it's order, and that order proves its structural perfection.
Okay. Proof 2. The argument of resonance, the deepest unity. This one, the source says, is the most intimate and shattering insight.
It states that you can only truly touch, truly know that which is made of the same essential stuff as you are.
What does that mean in practical terms?
Think about the intimacy of your own sensory experience right now. If you are living awareness, but the world is made of broken, dead, alien matter, there would be an unbridgeable gap between you, the subject, and the world, the object.
When you touch a stone, your hand wouldn't register its hard, smooth texture.
It would feel like static, like noise. Or maybe nothing at all. You would be a ghost haunting a machine.
But the intimacy of actually feeling the world, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the texture of a keyboard under your fingers, the resonance of a piece of music, it proves the opposite, doesn't it?
It proves that the knower, which is awareness, and the known, which is the world, are in perfect optimum resonance. The world is visible and touchable and understandable precisely because it is made of the same substance as the self. The intimacy of existence proves the system's unity and its perfection. If the world were flawed or alien, it would be invisible or untouchable to the awareness that is you.
And the final proof, proof 3, the argument of stability, existence itself.
This is the simplest and maybe the most powerful proof. If the universe were flawed, even by a tiny fraction of a percent, if the system were non-optimum, containing even the smallest structural error,
that error would compound.
Instantly.
Across the infinite complexity and interdependence of reality, it would cascade. The universe would have collapsed immediately into chaos, preventing existence itself from ever getting started. The stability required for us to even have this conversation, for atoms to hold their form, for the planet to stay in its orbit,
is the ongoing proof of the success of the self-balancing mechanism. Existence, in its very stability, is the ultimate proof of the system's perfection.
So we have completed the journey. We move from strategy, which is the desire to control and bias the means,
to no preference, which is the refusal to bias the outcome,
all the way to presence, the realization of the perfection of this moment. The strategy is laid down entirely because the game is already playing itself perfectly, and you are the substance of that perfect game.
And this culmination delivers what the source material calls the great relief. Strategy and preference are burdens. They are heady.
Preference implies that you, the localized individual, believe that you know better than the total intelligence of the universe itself. It places the tremendous burden of management and correction and worry onto your very limited shoulders.
And the moment you realize that the unfolding is already optimum, that the universe is succeeding in every single moment, you are strategically free.
Hmm.
You can drop the need to control. You can drop the strategy entirely and just be.
For you, our learner, the profound actionable insight here goes back to that idea of the empty mind, of mushin. The effort to control is what creates the struggle. It creates the anxiety. The key insight is in recognizing the power of the silence between the notes.
If you fill every moment with preference, with noise, calculation, striving, you get discord. You get a predictable, rigid melody.
But the lack of preference, the silence, the openness, that is the space that allows the perfect melody, the perfect action, to emerge spontaneously from the moment itself. It removes the lag time of egoic calculation.
And that spontaneous, perfect action flowing from a place of non-preference is the strategy of presence.
We invite you to consider the immense strategic power of laying down the burden of preference and just resting in the knowledge that this moment right now is fundamentally and structurally optimum. What would you do with that relief?
The journey is complete. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
We'll see you next time.